So I made $175 today. Super excited. And we're going to talk about that along with the leaps that I did on NVIDIA. And then we're also going to just take a look at Bitcoin along with MSTY and just see where they're at. But these day trades have been quite lucrative for me. Hello my friends, this is Legend. So today the market actually started off on a downtrend, but then eventually turned right around. And I'm just going to take a look at SPY here, and just to give you an example and what I did, where I set my lines to get in on that option trade and why I picked those lines. So before we get started, if you don't mind, hit that like button. It'd be much appreciated. So for the SPY put that I did sell today, to do that, we're going to flip it to the 15-minute chart right here. And let me zoom out here. And all I did to start it off for the day is I drew in the high point of yesterday. And that was about right there, right? About 679.57 area. And then I drew in a low point for yesterday. Now, this would have been the low point, but after hours, it did drop. So I'll pick the low point from the start of yesterday all the way up to the start of today, okay? So as you can see, it did drop here, so I drew that line right there at that 666.72. Now, what I did was, before market open, I put a little bell here, okay? And that bell was there just to notify me if SPY dropped below 666.50. And that's what this one here was set at. And I click it, you can see 666.50. So all that's going to do is notify me and tell me it's down below 666.50 and therefore take a look. And sure enough, it was moving up a little bit, but as soon as it opened, it fell. And it triggered that notification right there, which then I checked it out and saw it coming on down. And since it did break yesterday's low, I went ahead and I jumped in. So what I ended up doing, I sold a put. And since that bottom of yesterday was at 666.72 right here, I went ahead and I sold it at 665. Okay, I could have picked 666, but I figured, well, I'll just put it at 665. Even that's still a little aggressive, right? But I also want to note here that this was the low, right? This was the low of the pre-market. So if we zoom out, is this line here a past support or resistance line? So if I turn back to the hour chart right here, that red line, you can see, look at this over here. It was a support here, right? It was bouncing off over here before shooting back up. And what was it back over here? Look at this, a bit of a resistance, okay? And I'm gonna turn off the MAs just to help so you can see a little bit. And that red line there, you can see, then it was a bit of a resistance line, kept getting knocked down until it finally broke past it, and then it became a support line. So that 666 area was a pretty strong recent support line. So that's what I was using. So now back over here on the 15-minute chart, when it started dropping down, I went ahead and jumped onto that 665 put. And by selling that 665 put, I'm agreeing to buy shares if the price is below 665 by close. And the expiration date is today. But as you can see, it did drop as low as 661.21 before it started moving back up. And once it did that, it broke past that 666 area and kept on going. We ended up closing at 670, which means it expired worthless. And since it is above my strike, I do not have to buy shares at that 665 or be assigned shares at that 665. So that was a nice, easy $175 for that play right there. And right here is my receipt. You can see the November the 7th, 665 put where I did sell to open, earned $175. And that's $1.75 times 100 shares times one contract is $175. So not too shabby for a single day. Now I'm super excited about that, but the one that I'm most excited about is the LEAPS that I did on NVIDIA. Now for NVIDIA, I had this line at this 180 here, okay? And if I zoom back on this one, you can see that 180 right here, it was somewhat being respected. Even though it did break below it at times, right? It did come back up and then started respecting it again. So that 180 is a pretty strong support. And of course, the next one down was about that 176. But that 180 has been hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it just keeps on going, right? And we did today again test that 180. So here on the 15-minute chart, you can see it opened at about 185 and it started coming down. And I had no idea it was actually going to get down to $180, but it actually did. Look at this. So what did I do when it did that? Well, once it hit that 180, I went and I looked at creating a LEAPS for it. And for a LEAPS, basically what you're doing is you're going to buy to open a call. And for a LEAPS, it's usually a 1 year or further out. It's a long call that you did buy to open. And here on the options chain, you can see here are all the different dates or the strike dates that you can select from. So I had to pick between a January 2027 or a January 2028. So I went ahead and I went out 2 years on this thing, right? So I went with a January 2028. And for a LEAPS, you normally are looking to buy a deep in the money call, okay? I like to buy my LEAPS at around a 90 delta. Now some do 80 and some do 70 and some even do higher than 90, right? But I like to try to shoot for around about a 90 delta. What that means is for every dollar that NVIDIA moves, it's going to move 90 cents. So it's going to move 90 cents to that dollar at that time, right? And that's just a snapshot in time. So if I scroll this over, I can look over here on the delta right here, and I can come down and I'm going to look for that 90 delta, right? And that 90 delta is right there. That's a 90 delta, strike being a 105, okay? Now, of course, this is after hours. I actually placed this trade earlier today. Did it actually right at about lunchtime, and therefore the bid ask is going to be different. Because the bid ask right now is 100 to 103. When I got in for a mid price of about 95. Okay? Meaning that's how much it's going to cost me per share times 100 shares. So that's going to cost me $9,500 to get into this LEAPS. But I'm paying for that time, right? I'm paying for 2 years. And since I'm deep in the money, that delta's high, that means it's going to move more for me. Now that can work for me and it can work against me, right? At a 90 delta, and I paid $95 for it per share, that means my break even would be 105 plus the 95. Okay, because I pay 95 and the strike is 105. So if you add the two together, you find out what your break even is. And my break even then would be about $200. So I will need NVIDIA here to be above $200 by the end of this contract. Now, do I have to wait until it's above $200? No, I do not. And why don't I need to do that? Well, it's simple because as time is going, as the price is going up, this bid ask is changing, okay? So as you can see, the mid right now is almost 102, right? So if I bought it at 95 and it's currently about 102, just to keep the numbers simple, that's a difference of $7. That means I buy it at 95, I sell it at 102, I make $7 per share times 100 shares. That's $700 that I could actually have sold it today and made about $700 in one day on this play. So I could have went ahead, closed it out, took the $700 and went on my merry way, right? I could have done that, and that would have been a very nice profit. Because if you look here, if I say $700 and just say, what if I did sell it? $700 divided by how much I actually had invested in it, and that's $9,500. So that's over 7% earned on NVIDIA in one day. That's crazy, right? That is some crazy money. It doesn't always work out that way, but wow, NVIDIA just moved crazy today. I mean, look, it went up $8, right? And if I would have sold, I could have made $7 in just one day. Now you're saying, well, I could have bought the shares at 180 and I could sell it right now and make $800. Well, yes, you could. So then why would I actually have a LEAPS instead of just buying the shares, right? If I could have made $800 today if I bought the 100 shares versus the LEAPS selling today and only making $700, well, one reason would be I only spent $9,500 to do that, right? Owning the shares, 100 shares, would have been $18,000. So I got to play it like owning the shares at half the cost, right? I only paid $9,500. So though I made 7% off of the LEAPS, had I bought the shares and made $800, that percentage for the day would have been $800 divided by the $18,000, and I'm just rounding, right? That's only going to give me 4% for the day. So as you can see, the LEAPS or options gives you that leverage, because when you're buying those calls, you spend less and have the potential of making more. Now, anytime you buy an option, you are needing it to move in one direction versus selling options. I normally sell options, but I am starting to look more into also adding LEAPS into the mix. And I'm doing LEAPS because that goes out a year or maybe 2 years. That gives me plenty of time, gives the stock plenty of time to move in the right direction. And once it gets up to a certain point, then I can start putting stops on there to protect from the downside, assuming the stock's going up. But I only want to do LEAPS on stocks that are normally going up and to the right. Because here, if you look at that 5-year chart, it's a nice chart going up and to the right. 1-year chart, you can see we did have a dip, but of course we all know what this dip is, right? That's that April dip that we had earlier this year. But even with that, we were at around maybe, 147, and we're at 188 even after the dip. So it's going up and to the right. And you also want to make sure that the stock itself seems to be a stock that is going to be continually to move up. Now, nobody can tell the future, but you try to stack the cards in your favor as much as you can. So that's the reason why once it did hit my line right there at that 180, that's the reason I went ahead and jumped in on that LEAPS, because I'm looking at that being a low point, and then I can start riding this thing up. And if this thing moves back up to $200, whew, I'm going to be sitting pretty nice. All right, so now let's just take a quick look here on Bitcoin. And you can see it looks like Bitcoin is somewhat just kind of trading sideways, right? But it has been dipping down. And we have been breaking below that 100K. You can see here on the 4th, we broke below it. Then today, we broke below it. We went as low as 99.2K. So we are definitely testing that 100K. And it is going to continually, looks like, chip away at it. Now I'm hoping that this thing can be supported at that 100K and eventually start moving up. And since it did move back up a little bit today, we did get a little green. That helped Mr. to move back up, because you can see we actually broke below that line as well. That line is a pretty major support line that we had drawn in quite a while back. You can see over here around February, that was a pretty strong support. We bounced off of it about 3 times right here. So we definitely want to try to keep that. We did break below it, but closed above it. It still needs Bitcoin to move though, because if Bitcoin does continue to drop on down, then Mr. will have no choice but to come down as well. It'll end up breaking that 235 area. Then we could be headed all the way back down to about 170 area. So I don't want to see that for sure. But that's the same thing with Bitcoin. If we break this 100K, we've got a little tap right here at about the 98, but then it's dropping down to 93, and you can just see where the other ones are here. We're back down into the high to low 80s, okay? So we don't necessarily want that, right? I don't. Unless you're looking to buy, then you're saying, come on down, right? Come on down. I'm going to pick up some more Bitcoin. But for myself, I need Bitcoin to level off, strengthen up this 100K, and then start moving on back up so that Mr. can move on back up. Because if Mr. can move up, that's what's going to push Misty up. And we have had some rough times in Misty, right? I mean, we're at 967 now. Whew, who would have thought, right? And I'm sure the people in the comments are going to raise their hands and say, yeah, I told you it was going to the floor. But if Mr. is coming down, as you can see right here, if Mr.'s coming down, Misty cannot go up, right? It uses Mr. as the underline. So if the underline is coming down, well, Misty's coming down. I mean, that's just how it's going to be. It cannot do the opposite of the underline. So when you see Misty dropping like this, it does suck, but it can only do what its underline is doing. And Mr. can only do what Bitcoin is letting it do as well. And Bitcoin continues to move down. Therefore, the others are going to move down with it. There's just no getting around it. Now for Misty, currently, like I said, we are at 967. We dropped and hit 885 today. So that is an extreme low, because you can see we have not been this low, right? We were looking to hopefully hold at about $17 right here. But since Mr. just kept on coming down, Misty's coming on down. Some people would say, well, these are good buy points. And it could be. But for me, I would like to see Mr. slow down and start trading sideways to find a support. Once Mr. can find a support, then it may be a better time to look into maybe buying some more shares of Misty at that time. But how can Mr. find a support when Bitcoin is just continually to fall, especially when it's going to start dropping below that 100K? If that happens, we might be in for a bit more of a fall. But the way Mr.'s been falling here, I personally am waiting. I'm just going to hold and capture my distributions. And speaking of distributions, I will be updating my spreadsheets this weekend. I'll definitely be celebrating once we enter in those distributions, especially for Misty. So sometimes when the high yield ETFs or whatever you're in at the moment, when it's just having a rough time, it could be buy points or you may need to just sit on your hands and wait it out and find out when's the right time to start buying. While I'm waiting, I'm selling my puts on SPY and I'm buying LEAPS on NVDA to help bring in some more money. So you do have to have more than one strategy going on at a time. You can't always just rely on one trick. You've got to have more options in the bag, pun intended. So if you are interested in my plays, I do try to keep that updated on my Discord. Whenever I sell a call, sell a put, buy a call, or anything like that, I'll take screenshots and I'm putting that in my Discord just to notify everybody when I make those trades. Along with any high yield ETF buys that I do, I will put those in there as well. And don't forget, that is also where you'll be able to get access to the spreadsheets and the Rev 3, and that's the new Rev 3 of the stock tracker sheet will be uploaded to that this weekend, which is my plan. So I think I'm going to wrap it up right there. So if you don't mind, hit that like button. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button too, as it does help the channel out. And as always, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Please do your own due diligence before you get into any stock plays. And until next time, Legend out.